Hi, thanks for joining me today for this talk on the Jewish community of Caerphilly. My name is Laura Henley Harrison, and I'm the project officer for the Jewish History Association of South Wales. We've recently been carrying out a series of talks that are looking at the different Jewish communities around the valleys, and many of these are no longer in existence. So today I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Caerphilly. So it's been quite challenging to uncover the history of the Jewish community in Caerphilly. For starters, the county borough of Caerphilly was not created until 1996. Searching for the Caerphilly Jewish community online yields very little. There are only 63 articles in the Jewish Chronicle that mention Caerphilly, and these are mostly about local politics, marriages, obituaries, and obviously cheese. The modern-day boundaries of Caerphilly incorporated 4 historical Jewish communities which all formed in the early 20th century and did not last past a few decades. Bargoed Hebrew congregation formed in around 1916, but by 1930 had merged with the new Tredegar congregation due to falling numbers. Reports differ with regards to Bargoed having its own synagogue, but a synagogue is definitely mentioned in Jewish Chronicle articles. In 1918, the synagogue was on North Road in Bargoed, but it was likely in someone's home, as North Road is a residential street. Ordnance Survey maps from 1916 also show no markings for an official synagogue. The new Tredegar Hebrew congregation was founded slightly earlier in 1903. It appears that they also had no official synagogue building, with a bar mitzvah in 1924 being held at the Lesser Hall in New Tredegar, which was within the Tredegar Working Men's Hall on Morgan Street. The announcement of the official forming of the community notes that the Sefer Torah was held at the home of Mrs. Harris at Victoria Buildings. However, by 1908, there was reference made to a synagogue chambers in New Tredegar, but there is unfortunately no address for this. There were still announcements of weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs of Jewish families still living in New Tredegar during the 1930s, but it gives no indication of any form of organized community activities by this time. It would appear that their merge with Bargoed did not provide either community with any longevity. Blackwood and District Hebrew congregation appears for the first time in the Jewish Chronicle in 1923. This community was extremely small, and by 1929 there was a report of a bar mitzvah in Blackwood where the Torah portion was to be read at the boy's home. This would confirm that a formal synagogue building was likely never sourced, and this community was extremely short-lived. The fourth early community within the boundaries of Caerphilly was the Newbridge Hebrew congregation. There was mention of a Jewish man from Newbridge as early as 1852, a Mr. Goodman, who attended the laying of the Merthyr Synagogue foundation stone. It was the early 1900s before the community received regular mentions in the provinces section of the Jewish Chronicle. It was not until 1915 that a synagogue in Newbridge was mentioned, and once again this is likely to have been a smaller, non-purpose-built building, as in 1916 a bar mitzvah was held at the Newbridge schoolroom. It's believed that this community had disappeared by the late 1920s, and there's also a single reference in the Jewish Chronicle mentioning an apparent merge with the Newbridge community in Abertillery, but very little is known about this. Although these small early communities still have a rich history to share, today I wanted to focus more on more current contributions of Jews in Caerphilly. We've been very fortunate that a number of our oral histories have touched upon Jewish influence in Caerphilly, which was not in the form of religious life and synagogue worship, but business, industry, and contribution to employment and regeneration of the area. I would like to share the voices of some of these individuals with you today. Pontegwindi Industrial Estate in Caerphilly was constructed on land originally taken over by the Home Office in 1938 to house people who might be forced to evacuate from Cardiff, Barry, and Newport during the impending war. The site was used by American forces until 1944, and after this it housed German prisoners of war. It eventually housed local families, but became disused by the 1960s when construction began on the industrial estate. These estates often sprang up as a response to unemployment from the decline of mining and heavy industries in South Wales. It was hoped that attracting incoming businesses would create much-needed jobs in the area. Treforest Industrial Estate near Pontypridd has a very rich history of Jewish-owned businesses, but the Jewish businesses in Caerphilly are less well documented. Hungarian-born George Ostreicher established his business on Pontegwindi Industrial Estate after becoming bored working for his family's textile shops and market stalls in Cardiff. Here, George explains his family history and his life in the music industry.
So your father would work on Saturday?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my mother would give him hell when it was a Day of Atonement that he should close. And later on when we had shops, we opened textile shops, you got to close. You can't close the busiest day of the year, you know. Or even on Saturday she wanted us to close, but no. My mother wasn't a religious maniac, but she was religious, you know, and tried to influence my father and me in every possible way.
So you're working on the markets now.
Yeah.
You left school at 15. Mm-hmm. What happened after that then?
We opened some shops. I spent some of my time in the shop in Queen Street and some of my time out in the markets. Right. Then I got bored with it all, and with two other friends of mine, we decided to go into manufacturing. And we started manufacturing guitar strings and violin strings. Both my friends left at the early stage. One had a girlfriend, followed him over, married her child, had to find a decent job. The other one's family business needed him, so I was left on my own. So I carried on at a factory in Caerphilly, making guitar strings, shipping all over the world, export business, and then that's what I did. And one by one I closed all the shops down because people stopped making their own dresses. You could buy a ready-made dress a lot cheaper and a lot easier. It's a very small business, it's a very friendly business, music business. You go to the music shows, you meet people, you do business with people, and one thing leads to another. I got into the guitar business through people I was selling guitar strings to in Chicago. They were opening at that time, all the talk was Britain going to common market, and all the Americans are afraid of being locked out, so all rushing to get a foothold in the UK market, so they would have a toe in the European market. So they made me an offer I couldn't refuse to go into partnership with them, and that's how it all started. It's being in the right place at the right time, circumstances.
And where was the factory in Caerphilly?
Pontygwyn Industrial Estate.
Okay. That wasn't part of Treforest?
No, that was another one.
Right. Did you have another factory there?
No, that was a competitor. There's that was a company called General Music Strings. It was founded by an Austrian Jew, came over before the war, a long time before the war, and he founded General Music Strings and printing company as well, so you could print their own packaging, estate printers and an engineering business to build their own machinery.
So there were a lot of Jewish businesses in the valleys at that time?
Many, yes, and in Cardiff.
George then goes on to tell us about his sale of his business to a kibbutz in Israel.
So the guitar string business then, what was that called?
Originally it was Cardiff Music Strings, and then I bought a competitor in London, British Music and Tennis Strings. And I moved the whole thing down here, so changing it to British Music Strings. And I shipped all over the world strings. It was a nice business. In the end, I started importing guitars and distributing guitars, which was a much easier business because I lost my attention for detail. Because manufacturing, fiddly things like that, it demands a lot of attention. I lost it. So I ended up selling the whole factory lock, stock and barrel to a kibbutz in Israel. The kibbutzim at that time were looking to add industry to the farming society, and this one kibbutz down in the Arava Valley near Elat, very close to Elat, on the Jordanian border, they were looking for high value stuffs but low volume to keep the transport costs down. And the Jewish agency came, and they had all the accountants and experts, looking into the business, and they decided, yes, this is perfect for them. So they bought the business, and I had the 12 of my lads from Caerphilly over there for almost a year, but 6 of them for a year, just training and teaching them how to do it, because it wasn't viable anymore. No matter how good the stuff was, if it wasn't made in America, nobody wanted it. America was a home of rock and roll. You could turn out barbed wire, and as long as it was made in America, they'd buy it. Our quality was great. We used to sell to all the old British colonies. When I bought British Music and Tennis Strings, I inherited all their old customers from all the old, Jewish colonies. Hi. Southeast Asia. I don't know where all those guitar strings went. Unbelievable. So historically, that factory was going since 1912. It's the height of the empire still, I guess. So they had all their customers. But as things moved on, everybody wanted Americans. So I thought there's no future in this business, so I sold it.
What happened to the building that you had in Caerphilly then?
I sold it. I sold it to an engineering company now. I had another building there for the import and distribution business, which was much bigger. I rented one, and then I bought another one, and that was a totally different business. Importing and distributing guitars. I used to supply all the mail order companies, people like Woolworths, British Mail Order Corporation, Littlewoods. At the height, I came in just after the Beatles era, so the guitar business was already on its way down. But it was a nice business, you know. I probably imported about 40% of all the guitars sold in the UK at one time. Not value, but quantity. I was always at the bottom end of the market, the beginner's end of the market. I had that well covered.
Marcel Galton set up his business, Gulmet Doors, in Virginia Park in Caerphilly. Marcel was a gifted mechanical engineer, and they manufactured propelling pencils, pens, lighters, roll shutter doors and locks, mainly from aluminium. The business was in operation in 1951, but had gone into decline by the mid-1960s, and the tooling was transferred to Walsall lock and cart gear. Judy Hornung was interviewed as part of the Hineni project, and we're lucky enough to hold transcripts of these interviews in our archives. Unfortunately, we have no audio for this interview, but I would like to read a little bit from Judy's excerpt. So she was asked, what was Marcel making? And Judy replied, well, during the war, the reason that Marcel's family came to Cardiff was because Treforest Trading Estate opened up for refugees to open factories to make wartime things, like parts for aeroplanes, which was before my time, but that's the sort of thing they were making. And after the war, I know Marcel went to America to look for ideas, because America was well ahead of Britain in those days, and he used to come back with all kinds of things, especially a biro pen and a cigarette lighter that you put on the table and one for the pocket, so they made those. He then went in with some people from London with the pens, and then they went on to make ironing boards and step stools. Tubular steel was the type of material that they were looking for. Step stools, ironing boards. I still use the Gulmet ironing board. It's difficult to get a cover for it, but I've found a source, and that's what they made. And then they sold out, and Marcel and his brother joined their father in Caerphilly making garage doors. Gulmet Doors, and at that time, in the 1960s, my father-in-law was a very go-ahead businessman. They were building like mad, and the Lady Mary estate, the Lakeside estate, and every garage door was a Gulmet door in the 60s, so it was a boom time. But boom times don't last, and so things went downhill a bit in the next stage, especially when my father-in-law died the weekend before they were going public. So they weren't able to because they said the death duties would be enormous. And that was my boom time. And after that, with all the uncles dying, there were 3 uncles in the business. The 4th one was a dentist, but he was also involved in the business. It was a very difficult struggle for them, especially to keep all the families, all of the widows. The business passed down through the family, eventually being run by Des Galton and his brothers. His niece, Gabby Coppell, talks about her father's business, Coxco Engineering, and their merger with her Uncle Des's business in Caerphilly.
It definitely made a big change to our life because my dad suddenly had, quite a lot of money compared to just being on a wage before. And he left Aero and he set up his own business called Coxco Engineering, where it was like tool making. They used to make basically bits for machines, die castings, and also roller shutter doors, because he eventually amalgamated. So my uncle Des and his brothers had a company called Gulmet Doors. They used to make roller shutter doors, like sort of garage doors and shop fronts, and they're on vans as well. And so they all amalgamated as well. So they had a sort of business that they all ran together.
Where this business was?
Yeah, it was not on Treforest, so it was Caerphilly, I think. I think there's an estate in Caerphilly. I think they had it in Caerphilly.
We interviewed Slovakian-born Des Galton as part of our oral history project. Here he tells us about coming to Wales at the age of 16 and how he enjoyed life in Wales and felt at home here.
Can I ask you, you came to Wales and you were quite old when you were 16. Do you feel in any way any Welshness about you at all?
Yes, I do. You see, I feel very Welsh. And it's very strange because I have no reason, but it shows that when there is an international, like the other day, of course I wish and I want Wales to win. And I feel very happy here because the people were extremely nice to me. And I try to reciprocate. You see, when I was running the factory, which was a few years ago, I introduced a very substantial and nice training scheme for apprentices. And we trained every year about 6-7 people who became quite qualified in the way. So I thought, well, this is the way I repaid the kindness which they showed me.
And what was the name of the firm at that time? Was it this?
It was Metal Products.
Yeah, okay. And you play rugby as well?
Yes, I learned playing rugby in school, in Whitchurch Grammar School, and then I joined Caerphilly, and I played for Caerphilly for a number of years. I enjoyed it.
Julius Weil discussed another Jewish-owned business in Caerphilly, Dellins, which was previously called the Standard Box and Carton Company. It had been established by the uncle of Julius's oldest friend, Geoffrey Fisher. Dellins was moved from Pentrabach to Caerphilly after a heavy snowstorm caused the roof of the factory to collapse.
I had moved to Cardiff probably around 1959 or 1960.
Okay. What prompted you to move to Cardiff?
Because everybody else, every other member of the company lived in Cardiff.
Right, okay.
My friends lived in Cardiff, and Merthyr was a small sort of town. It wasn't the place for me, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. Well, you were still working. Well, you were working initially. You were still working at Merthyr, and then you were working. Not Merthyr, but Pentrabach.
In Pentrabach, yes.
And then Caerphilly, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. Well. What happened? I moved to Cardiff, and we all travelled up together in the same car every day until the factory moved to Caerphilly. Yes.
Right.
Dellin Packaging Limited is still trading on the Dufferin Business Park in Caerphilly. They now produce plastic food packaging, mainly for meats and ready meals. Julius also recalled another Jewish-owned business in Caerphilly, Burlington Fabrics, on the Western Industrial Estate.
I suppose our packaging company, which eventually was called Dellin Packaging, they were not refugees, but it was a Jewish company.
Right.
How many more can I think of? Burlington Fabrics, George Herzog, who died last week and whose funeral I went to on last Friday. They also initially they made gloves, but then they printed silk printers eventually in Caerphilly. There are others.
And these are mainly families that came from what, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, that kind of area?
From Europe, yes.
Yeah.
Burlington Fabrics opened in January 1953 and was only dissolved recently in January 2022. They won a Queen's Award to Industry in 1972 for export achievement. Another Caerphilly business owned by a Jewish refugee was Western Gloves, discussed here by Austrian-born George Schoenmann.
At the end of that, I think in about 1964, I decided that I didn't really want to spend any more time in Merthyr. Jill was very keen that we move, and we managed to find a house in Cardiff, and we moved to Cardiff. And Jill's mother, who was widowed by this time, she couldn't manage financially on her own, and it was decided that we'd sell her house and we'd sell our bungalow, and between the two of us we would buy a bigger house in Canton, in Cardiff. And of course it didn't make sense to commute from Canton to Merthyr. I needed to look for somewhere a bit nearer. So then I got a job. I just looked in the Echo, and there were always jobs. It was never a problem. And there was a firm called Western Gloves in Caerphilly who were looking for someone to assist the managing director, who was Mr. Altschul, who was another refugee from Austria. And so I went to him, and I was there for 2 years, and in the end you get itchy feet, so you buy the Echo again and look, and lo and behold, Stuart Singham on the Treforest estate, who was a Mr. Taub and a Mr. Pick. They were looking for an assistant to the sales director, so I went there.
Erwin Altschul was a refugee from Prague, where he fled Nazi occupation in 1938. He initially opened his glove-making business in Treforest before moving to Caerphilly in 1958, when its name changed from B. Altschul Gloves to Astoria Gloves. It finally became Western Gloves, and they manufactured items for Marks & Spencer, Woolworths, and other big brand names. By the mid-1960s, it was one of the biggest glove factories in the country. The business eventually closed in January 1973. It should be remembered that many of the refugees who established businesses in Wales faced a number of challenges, a large barrier being with language. George Ostreicher recalls how his parents, especially his mother, struggled with learning English.
He managed. My father could speak a bit of German, he could speak Yiddish. I suppose once you can speak, Hungarian, of course. And he went and got a job in London. The factory he went to work for were also Jewish people, the owners. Maybe he spoke to me Yiddish, I don't know. But he got on well. My mother stayed here for about 6 months, went to English language lessons in the civic centre. But she was, never mastered it, because when we moved here and my father bought his house, my mother had a Hungarian housekeeper, and her husband worked for me. By then I had a factory in Caerphilly. Her husband worked for me in the factory as a storekeeper and used to wrap up all the parcels. But so my mother had this Hungarian housekeeper for years and years and years. And when she retired, they went back to Hungary. She had this Italian woman. So her English was terrible as well. So my mother never really, she could speak it, but never well, never well. In all the years. Well, she died in 1999. So from 1957 to 1999, I mean, she got the rudimentary, but not very good.
These businesses brought a significant amount of employment to the area, and it was not only in the form of establishing businesses, but also encouraging other businesses to open in Caerphilly, including RSJ Plastics Limited. This interviewee wished to remain anonymous, but gives us an insight into his role in encouraging a Japanese business to settle in Caerphilly.
Anyway, he was packing his case to go back to London. We were going to put him on the train for 6:55, yeah. Anyway, as he was packing, a little piece of plastic, corrugated plastic, dropped out of his briefcase. And Sam, being the man he was, said, "What's that?" Never been heard of, okay? And the man said, the Japanese man said, well, it goes on roofs. It's, you know, like 6 foot or 8 foot or 10 foot, 2 feet wide, it's corrugated, and it goes on roofs.
Yeah.
Sam was so interested that he put an order down there and then for, I think, about 8,000 sheets, which came in the wrong size and everything was wrong.
Yeah.
And I think he dumped half of it.
Yeah.
But that business then grew, and it was called RSJ Plastics Limited, and it was one of the businesses for which I was managing director. And we grew that business so big that we persuaded the Japanese to open the very first factory in Wales.
Okay.
So from an accident,
Yeah.
a piece of plastic dropped out, we were the dominant supplier in the UK, to the point that we couldn't, the life currencies changed and we couldn't afford to import. So I went to Japan with a colleague, and over a 2-year period we persuaded them to open a factory in Caerphilly.
Right.
It was, I believe, the first Japanese factory in Wales. And Wales shares the coal industry and Japan's coal industry. Welsh people and Japanese people have a lot in common. And we opened the factory in October 1973. And I think that's an amazing story, how the brilliance of Sam, for us, we expanded the business to, we were the dominant supplier. That's why they couldn't afford to lose us.
He also goes on to explain the reason why their family left the area, and with the decline of the Jewish population, it often meant a transfer of businesses and an inevitable loss of employment in South Wales.
We actually left Cardiff in 1989. I'd moved the head office of the company. We were expanding, and where our head office was in Caerphilly, Cardiff, we moved it to Manchester. Reason being that at that moment my eldest son joined the company as marketing director under me, and my other son, being a dentist, married a Manchester girl. I wanted the family to stay together, so I managed to move the headquarters from Caerphilly to Manchester, where we all then settled for 10 years.
Jewish business owners did not just establish businesses which created much needed jobs in the area. Mervyn Joseph, an optician, describes his project to regenerate a building in Caerphilly, which also created job opportunities.
I know it sounds a bit showy-offy, but I actually won a Prince of Wales award for one of my schemes. And we were lucky enough to go to the palace and do a presentation in front of Prince Charles.
Like to say a bit more about that? What kind of scheme it was and what you liked about it?
Yeah, it was a derelict building in Caerphilly, which I converted into units, which created a lot of employment, and you know, it got quite a reception from the Civic Trust and things of that nature as well, because it was right in the centre of Caerphilly. So it not only got rid of, you know, an eyesore, but created employment for about 25-30 people. But it's a bit scary giving a presentation to Prince Charles, but it's quite amazing how knowledgeable he is and how well he'd been sort of
sort of shown about the project. He knew everything about it.
You've been briefed about it. Yeah.
Very well briefed, yeah.
And where did you have to do this presentation then?
In St James's Palace.
The Jewish community would also get involved in charity and relief work in Caerphilly. Arnold Krotowski, who ran a kosher butcher shop in Cardiff, recalls his volunteer work with the Jewish Ex-Servicemen's Association.
We were talking earlier about your work with the Jewish ex-servicemen. Do you want to talk about that, or say work? You know what you do. You know.
Well, I mean, we used to have meetings and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we do jobs. We volunteered for giving that a holiday, Christmas Day,
Yeah.
to the nursing staff. And all the Jewish ex-servicemen would go in and relieve the nursing.
Right. Yeah.
And they went all around all the various hospitals in Cardiff.
Yeah.
You see?
What was the Leonard Cheshire? It was his home. They used to go as well. Yeah. Was that in Caerphilly? It was up.
Leonard Cheshire VC. There's one in Raddock.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were there at Christmas.
Christmas Day, yes.
These clips from our oral histories show that many successful Jewish-owned businesses were established in Caerphilly, creating much-needed employment opportunities and successful unions. However, I will leave you with this last clip from Lawrence Kahn about a not-so-successful union in Caerphilly.
So can we stop there? So how did you meet your wife?
My cousin in London wrote to me and said, I've met two women. Oh, I said, I'm reading the letter. One of them works for the Halifax Building Society and lives in Caerphilly. The other one lives in London, and she's a dental nurse.
Yeah.
Oh. I thought, well, I'll try the one in Caerphilly. It's a lot closer.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out with the one in Caerphilly for a while, and then I thought, well, perhaps I ought to try the one in London. Well, I had a TR6, and I'm not sure. I think it was a Sunday. I drove up to the house in Kingsbury, and I was wearing an Aran sweater, which my wife tells me about to this day, which my mother had knitted, and she's apparently. Her and her mother were standing in the window looking at me get out of the car. A sports car. Oh, that sweater. No, not for me.
So thank you very much for listening to the talk. If you want to get in touch with us for any further information or to find out more about what we do, then here are all of our details. Thank you.